This is gonna be fun. Right.
Okay, well, let's start with the roughing gouge, the big tool. Let me show you a cut here on how to do it properly. First, you touch the tool to the tool rest, nothing else. Then you grip the tool firmly and you rub the bevel and make a cutting pass. Nice clean shavings come off. It looks nice, simple, and easy, right? But remember, you have to touch the tool rest first to get those nice little cuts. And you can see by having a firm grip on the tool, that doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean. The tool doesn't move back and forth, and so it stays stable. Also with the bevel rubbing, you get really nice shavings off the wood. Okay, now let's have some fun and show what happens when you don't put the tool on the tool rest first. Ow! Happens fast, doesn't it? Look at that. And the result when that happens, you lose a big chunk of wood usually. And that's because the wood always wins. It's going to grab the tool and slam it down. But let's look at that in slow motion. It happens so quickly, there's no way you can prevent it. But look, my hand is above the tool rest. Really dangerous. Look where my finger is, by the way. This thing gets slammed down so fast and so hard, that's hundreds of pounds of pressure at least. I always wondered why people got black and blue fingers when turning. I never could figure out till I saw the slow motion of this. If I hadn't instinctively pulled back my finger just then, I would have been in a world of hurt, and we probably would have been done shooting the videos. Now, just for fun, let's look at this from a different angle. Wham! This also shows another way you can get hurt. You lose control of the tool. So I'm barely above the tool rest, right? But still, the pressure is so hard it knocks it down, flips it back, and this is the only time I got hurt shooting all these videos. You're going to see briefly that the tool kicks back into my index finger. It actually went all the way to the bone. It doesn't look like much right there, but that's because the blood had not started flowing yet. Okay, now let's take a look at what I like to call an edge catch. When you're roughing out a square blank, you don't come from the edge. It's not good. If you've got your tool positioned too deeply or at the wrong angle, it's going to catch into that wood and it's going to really mess things up. That's why I always like to start roughing out from the center of a blank and going towards the edges. If you're a new turner, you should always do that. Once you have a little experience, you can come from the edge, but obviously don't have the tool protruding so far over the tool rest like this, because it will grab it really, really hard. Now let's look at a good cut. The first one is a smoothing cut, one of my two favorite cuts to make with a roughing gouge. You can see I have the tool on the tool rest, the bevel's rubbing, and I have a firm grip on the tool. I've got it angled to the side so the front of the tool is pointing to where I want to go. It takes off really nice shavings and leaves a very smooth surface. The other cut I like, I call the planing cut, and this is where you present the roughing gouge perpendicular to the wood. And so you're moving the tip back and forth. This is a really good cut to use when you're roughing out a really rough blank of wood. It's easier to control and easier to hang on to. You can also see it takes a smaller shaving, which you would think might leave you a smoother surface, but in reality, it doesn't, not compared to the smoothing cut. And that is because if you look at the smoothing cut on the right, you can see that the tool is at an angle and slicing the wood, more like a skew would. Now let's talk about the term supported edge and what that means. When you're making a good cut, the wood is making contact with the tool just below the center of the tool, and the tool itself is being supported by the tool rest in line with where that cut is happening. Now I know that sounds a little convoluted, so let me draw some lines to make it a little bit easier to explain. The green arrow is where the tool is making contact with the wood. The blue line is directly in line with that contact, and right below that blue line is where the tool is touching the tool rest. So it's supported. So in other words, all that force coming down on the edge of the tool is going directly straight through the tool, directly onto the tool rest. So of course, let's take a look at what happens when you have an unsupported edge when you're trying to make a cut. The tool makes contact with the wood and runs away. It backs up on you. So the dynamics are kind of interesting. What happens is we're making contact with the wood with a part of the tool that is not supported by the tool rest. So it rolls it. Imagine if you're on a teeter-totter and somebody 5 times your weight jumps on the other end. Well, you're the unsupported tool and they're the weight of the wood pushing down. So the blue line and the green arrow, I should be making contact in that line right there, so it'd be supported cut. However, where I'm getting ready to make contact is above that, where the red arrow is. So see that yellow line? That is where the tool should be supported. And so, since it's not supported, the wood and the tool, all this wants to fix itself. It wants to make it supported. So once it makes contact, bam, it starts to roll the tool over because it needs the support. Well, when it rolls it over, you lose control of the cut, you get a deeper cut, you get a catch, and that's the result. Ugh, doesn't look good. That's a big design modification. So let's look at this from the top so you can see rotation easier. Again, I'm supporting the tool, but I'm making the cut in the wrong spot. So where the blue line is that's where it's touching the tool rest. The red arrow is where I'm trying to make my cut. The yellow line is where the tool wants to be. So you can't fight physics. It's going to try to correct itself. And when it does, you lose complete control of the tool. So what is an uphill catch? When you're doing spindle turning, they always say you need to cut downhill. That means you go from high to low. So that's what I'm doing right now. However, now I'm going to go from low to high, which means coming out of the cove, and it gets a catch. The reasoning is that you've got your leading edge right now supported, but when you start making that curve, you can see this cut here looks nice, but when you move on into the curve, you start engaging an unsupported part of the tooltip, and it wants to get a catch. It's just a subtle difference in the position of the tooltip, but you can see one results in a clean cut, one results in a catch. So let's take this to the extreme. You can see I'm making an okay cut, not great, but when I start to go uphill, I get resistance also because there's an end grain running in line with the lathe right there, so it's kind of wanting to climb on top of the tool. You can see how it wants to roll it. So it gets to be grabby and boom, it gets a little more of a catch, and look, the wood's starting to get a little shaky. So if I go in there again, boom, it tried to climb up on it, it didn't like that. So anyway, it gets really wonky at that point. So in slow motion, you can see when the tool makes contact on the right tip, the wood actually wants to climb up. Those end grain fibers are grabbing the tool. Also, it stopped the turning just a little bit on the tailstock side, and the headstock kept turning, so it twisted the fibers, weakening the wood at that point. Now this is interesting right here. Now the tool is stronger than the wood, so the wood's going to lose when the tool makes contact, but the wood is going to try to climb up and over the tool because it's weak and it's bending. So that's how you wind up snapping things in half. So since we're talking grain direction, let's talk about end grain and why you never, ever cut it with a roughing gouge. You get a real difficult time. What you're seeing right now is a bowl blank, and bowl blanks are oriented, that looked good, didn't it, to where the grain is running towards you and away from you. So right now we have side grain, end grain, side grain, end grain hitting the tool. You can see the difference in that there are shavings and then there are chips. And you can see it gets a nasty catch when it gets into the end grain at the wrong point. Very tough cutting. So you see some shavings, but you see a lot of dust. The dust is the end grain as it's cutting across the tool. So as this sticks in here, you're going to see when it catches into the end grain. Okay, boom. End grain wants to crawl up over the tool just like it did in the spindle turning. And you can see how the end grain is pulled out here. Look at that. So instead of slicing the wood, you're literally tearing out chunks of it, just scraping it across basically. And it's really tough cutting, and it just tears the wood all up. That's why you want to make a slicing cut with a bowl gouge, which will leave a nice smooth surface. So let's start with the roughing cut for the bowl gouge. It's a very versatile tool and can do a lot of things. And this is a rough bowl blank right now. And you can see at the proper presentation, it's on the tool rest, it's supported, we're leading with the edge, it's making beautiful shavings. Now you might think we're cutting solid wood, but we're not. We're actually doing an interrupted cut. This is a dried bowl blank, so it's still out of round. So watch in slow motion. We're cutting, 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 and then, wait for it, whoops, there's air. So that's what happens. That's an interrupted cut. So you're only going to be in contact with wood a short amount of time, and then you're going to be in the air. So it's in, out, in, out, in, out of air to solid wood. So that's why you have to have a good, solid grip and brace the tool, lead with the front edge, and take a light cut. You can see it's really happy here. We're leading forward. Now, I'm trying to figure out ways to screw this up, so we'll just go backwards with this thing. Instead of leading with the tip, we're going to start swinging the tool around and try to make a cut with the trailing edge, that wing. Doesn't work, does it? All of a sudden, the tool gets flipped over because all that pressure is pushing down on that side of the tool and rolling it over. It rolls over so easily because there is no bevel touching. See all the gap right there? Plus, look at the size of the cut you're taking. Way too big. Which brings you to the greedy cut. That's where you want to take off more wood than you really should be. This is hard dried wood, and I'm trying to use half of the cutting edge on this bowl gouge. Doesn't work. All of a sudden you start getting bounce and vibration. You lose control. And when you lose control, that's not so good. Look how that wood bashes the tool around. Sooner or later, if you don't have a good grip on it, it's going to bite even deeper, and it's going to flip the tool over, possibly injuring yourself or busting up the bowl. I know which one's more important to you and me. Don't mess up the bowl. Lots of turners use the bowl gouge to make a tenon cut so they can attach the bowl to their chuck. The way you do it is you feed the tool in this way, but the thing you have to be careful of is right there. When you come into the flat on the bottom, you want to make sure that you don't make contact with that big sweeping cutting edge, because you'll get a big cut or a big catch. And the idea is to make a very smooth surface for your tenon to attach to. Here's a better example. Boom. See how the edge caught? There are a couple things that make that happen. One is the bevel of the tool is riding on the tenon. When that wing touches the bottom of the bowl, there is no bevel to support it. The other thing is it's a wider cutting area. So when that long cutting edge hits the wood, it all digs in at once and flips the tool. Now, I am known for using a modified parting tool to make the tenon cut. But you can get a catch with this tool too. One is if you present it flat, the end grain is going to roll over the top of the tool and try to pull it down. The other is if you use the whole width of the cutting edge to make your cut, that's too big a cut too. All that pressure is going to throw the tool down. Now, to prevent a catch, you trail the tool down a little bit and you take little nibbles of wood. That way it's not so aggressive and you don't have all those forces working against you. You can also see me planing out the bottom of the bowl because I want a flat surface for the jaws to sit on. Look at the bowl gouge with the red arrow. See how it's curved? You're not making a flat surface. With the parting tool, where the green arrow is, you're making a flat surface that goes up and in. That way the chuck jaws sit on the outer edge of that wood and give you the strongest hold possible. Now let's take a look at how you can use the bowl gouge on a bowl rim. Or, better yet, how not to. But this is how to. Presentation is good, taking little nibbles of wood, just a little bit of wood. That's the biggest key. You don't want to take a lot of wood off at this time. The other thing you might notice is this is a V-shaped gouge, not a U-shaped gouge. A V-shaped gouge has a narrower point, and it takes less wood. The U-shape is too wide when it takes too big of a bite, and you'd get a catch. This angle does a better job of showing you how tilted the tool is too. That way you can ride the tip of the bevel on the wood. Now this is the way to get a catch. You start taking too aggressive of a cut. I'm lower on the tool edge actually, and boom. It's nasty. So why does the rim give up and blow apart? It's because there's no strength to it. When you're hollowing out a bowl and it's thick, you have a lot of strength. But when you got just that rim left and you go back to it, the tool is going to win in this case, and so when it gets a catch, it's the wood that's going to give way. So what's the best way to avoid this? Make sure your rim is shaped the way you want it before you go further inside the bowl. So you say, hey, what about a pull cut? Well, same issue, except even worse. Because once you start pulling that tool across the rim of the bowl, you're exposing a very wide cutting edge. It takes just a little slip up for it to dig in and create the same design modification you made with the push cut. So what are the issues when you start hollowing a bowl out with a bowl gouge? Well, one of the first issues is your entry point. You need to use your thumb as a backstop. You need to have the bevel aiming in the direction you want to go, and you need to make contact with the proper part of the tool, which is the leading tip. And then as you feed it in, once it's inside the bowl, you can relax your thumb a little bit because you're riding on the bevel. Now this is a rough, dried bowl blank, so you can see a little bit of bounce, but you can also see you have a lot of control. Now look at this angle. You can see how the bevel is actually pushing in the direction you want to go. And this is also what is called a supported cut, where the shavings are coming off the leading edge of the tool, right there where the blue line is. You follow the blue line down. That part of the bottom of the tool is touching the tool rest. It gives a straight, direct line for all the forces of the lathe to travel through the tool down to the tool rest, providing you the optimal support. That way you have complete control over the cut. Now, why don't you cut with the wing of the tool? Well, kind of obvious reason. If you don't rub the bevel perfectly, you're going to engage too much of the tool, and you're going to have a wide cut, big catch, and big results. You can see that there's bevel rubbing, but not enough. And it's going to catch here in a second and take a huge cut. That's going to flip the tool over. And again, this is a weak wall at this point, right? So what happens? The bowl loses. You can see it doesn't have a rim anymore, and look how out of round it is. Look how much it's wobbling. That's because the force was so great, it nearly pulled the bowl out of the chuck jaws. Now we touched a little bit on the entry cut, but let's take another look at it. When you start to entry cut, you want to have the bevel of the tool aiming in the direction you want the cut to go. You're using your thumb as a backstop right now, but then as you see the bevel starts to ride on the wood, you can relax your thumb because it's going to follow the direction that you point the tool. Now if I come back and change the angle just a little bit, instead of being an actual push cut, it's almost like a pull cut, and then it starts to skate and skip across the wood. So on the left you see the good cut with the good approach, and the right cut with the bad approach. That's the wrong right. But anyway, you can see I'm pushing on the left side with the blue line, but when I'm doing the yellow line, I literally have to start pulling the tool to get it to go the direction I want it to go. So the bevel's not helping me at all. And then all of a sudden it starts to engage a little bit more of the curve on the tip of the tool. I start to lose control. So if you want to do this, make sure that you have the bevel angled the way you want it to go. You have your thumb as a backstop, and you take a small little cut, and then when you start rubbing the bevel, that's when you can relax and the cut will flow smoothly. Now to close, what I want to show you is how you do the bottom cut in a bowl without getting a catch. A lot of people don't realize you have to have the tool tip higher than the center of the bowl. And as you watch this, the tool tip is coming down. It's riding that wheel that you're making. And if you watch the handle on the tool from this angle, you can see how the handle rises and the tool tip goes down as it nears the center. Well, for grins, why don't we just start off on how to do a correct cut? That's a change of pace. So anyway, you can see that I have the tool gripped with my forefinger and my thumb. The tip of the tool is leading the progression here. In other words, it's leading the cut. So I'm pushing into it. The green arrow there shows right there on that leading edge is where the cut is happening. It's a nice, smooth, easy cut. Let's look at it a little bit closer now. And you can again see how it's below the center of the tool where the cut is happening. And this is very important because if you lead with the tip and have the tool supported, you're going to get a good cut and not a catch. The green arrow is where the cut is happening. And then the blue line is directly in line with the cut and going through the tool, right? That's where the tool is touching the tool rest. That's what they call a supported cut. If I cut up there in the red area on top of the edge, you'd see where the yellow line is. That part of the tool is not touching the tool rest, so it's not supported. That will cause a catch. And here it comes. Catches are not often spectacular. They're just design modifications which are really frustrating. As you can see, I'm starting to put the balance onto the edge, boom, and it catches. So I went from the leading edge up to the unsupported edge. So there's nothing supporting the tool at this point on the tool rest. So physics tries to fix itself, and it rolls the tool to where it will be supported. At that point, though, you've lost control, and bang, you get a catch. Pretty cool looking in slow motion. Now let's look at it one more time really close up. You can see where the red arrow is. I'm starting to touch the edge of the tool that's not supported. So bang, the flip happens. Now oftentimes the tool will win and the wood will break. In this case I'm using Purple Heart, which is really tough, so the tool lost. But again, there's the edge that's touching. Where is it supported? It's supported towards the front. So that's the part resting on the tool rest. The yellow part is where it should be resting on the tool rest. So of course, like I said, physics, nature, whatever, it wants to correct itself. So it's going to try to balance itself by rolling it over. Now it's supported, but hey, it's way too late. So when you're making a cove and get a catch, generally it's because you do one thing wrong. You try to cut uphill. We're cutting downhill, right? Downhill looks good, but watch what happens when I come to the middle of the cut and boom, I go uphill. It's really quick what happens. But I'm cutting with the edge, everything's fine, but now watch the right wing catch full face onto the wood there. The end grain is pointing in towards the center here, so it wants to climb up on top of the tool. So we're doing okay on our cut, but now all of a sudden we're exposing an unsupported edge of the tool. Wham! It takes it, turns it over, tries to balance it out. Design modification. And it's really interesting because it doesn't take much to make this happen. You can see the edge right there starting to touch, and look at the balance. It's just barely off towards the center of the tool. And also, if you notice, there's no bevel rubbing on the right-hand side, so that's going to make it flip even faster because there's no support from the edge of the tool. Now you can see how wide a cut it takes all of a sudden, and it's trying to put bevel support in, but you can see by the yellow line, that is not supported. The tool is not supported at that point, so that is going to try to right itself and flip it over. Hey, it's supported now. Too late. So who makes beads? I do, and you always sneak up on a bead, right? Well, part of the reason in making a bead is you have to make sure that you roll the tool and do everything properly. So we're going to make a cut going in right here, rolling the tool as we make the bead. But if you don't roll the tool enough, you're going to start catching that leading edge. So we're doing well here. You can see we're leading with the tool. Where the cut is happening, the tool is supported by the tool rest, but you continue to roll the tool and actually lift the handle to make this bead occur. Now I was just a little bit lazy on this cut. I should have raised the handle just a little bit more and turned it just a bit more because you can see the leading edge start to scrape the wood. Here it is closer up. You can see my mistake even better. But here's a proper cut making a bead. So roll the tool, roll the tool. You can see the tool is almost perpendicular at this point, but I still have that little bitty wing on the right hanging out. If I'd rolled it just a smidge more, it wouldn't touch and I would have a nice clean intersection. That's where it touches. That's the bad part. If I'd rolled it just a tick more, it would have been a beautiful cut. Now the skate. Boy, the skate is the most frustrating thing of all because you think you're going along fine and then all of a sudden, whoop, your tool goes running to the back. And then look at that major design modification. Hey, let's make spirals, right? So it takes a couple of things to make this go away, or to do it properly. But let's show how it goes wrong first. You can see I'm not using my thumb as a backstop very effectively. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the tool. You can also see I'm making contact with the center of the point of the tool. The bevel's not rubbing. So all of a sudden the wood starts pushing down on that edge and it literally shoves everything back to the left. So of course it takes it and runs with no bevel touching, with your thumb not holding against it, it wants to skate. So look at the small differences here. They're really subtle, but the tool on the right is aiming more to the right. It's pointing the way it wants to go, so the bevel's rubbing. On the left, it's pointing straight in, no bevel rubbing. Also, the tool on the left is rolled over more, so it's more of a knife edge. The tool on the right is rolled open, so it's more of a slicing cut. How about we start with something that is not punitive, that is not a catch. Let's show you how a relief grind cuts wood on a bowl. Now this bowl is about 1/4 inch thick, and I've already turned it all the way to the bottom. But hey, don't go back with a scraper to clean up on the inside because you'll get a catch, right? No, look at that. Isn't that amazing? You see that little shiny edge on top? That's what a relief grind is. This one happens to be 15 degrees, and then the tool is 75 degrees below it. I don't think it quite matters exactly what the angles are on top, but once you have the relief grind, it really works great. You can see how it's gently taking feathers of wood off, and there's no catch. If you put a scraper in there, and we'll show you in a minute, that is a bad thing. If it's a flat scraper, it's going to blow it up. But this is a scraper with a relief grind. Think of it this way. If you jump on a slide, just straight down on a slide, you're going to slide down. Well, that's what happens with the wood hitting the relief grind. At least that's the best I can explain it. And you can see here, look at the feathers of wood again. It's just taking delicate little cuts. It's really, really cool. Now, let's go for the real fun thing, the flat grind. You have to think about this as if you got a slide with no slope and you try to jump down it. You're just going to butt into it real hard. What happens is, as best as I can figure, is that the end grain comes down straight on top of that flat right angle, and it jars up through the wood and starts to split the fibers apart. It's a big design modification when this happens. That's why you don't ever take a flat scraper back out to the edge of a bowl, because at that point the walls are fragile, they're thinner, and if you do that blunt force object hit to it, the grain, the fibers are going to split apart, and then you wind up with big gaping holes. I mean, it's really disastrous looking. And you can see it gets aggressive fast. Look at the depth of that cut and the width of the cut, because the fibers are now coming down straight on that tool and grabbing it. Now here it is in regular motion. And you can see how aggressive it is. And look, we've lost... Oh, what a wonderful sound that is. Turn it off! Turn it off! But you can see, look, we're missing part of the bowl already. One small catch, and we took huge chunks of wood out. Now, this is so terrible to watch. Of course, we're going to keep showing it to you in slow motion over and over and over again. It's kind of like going to a NASCAR race or something, waiting for the crashes. So wait for it. Here it comes. Getting closer, closer. Somebody's losing control, and yellow flag. Okay, real time here. Look how quickly you lose your bowl. And now you're left with almost nothing. About this time, it's design modification number 12, and you're going to make a coaster. Not even a set of them, just one lousy coaster. Okay, let's take a look at the skew. And this, believe it or not, is going to be a correct cut by me. I am not a fan of the skew because I think it's a tool you have to be taught in person. It's one of those things, if you watch video, angles and things can be deceiving. But at least on this, I'll try to explain a little bit on what's going on. You can see I'm cutting with the bottom heel of the tool. I'm not cutting up near the tip because you want to have the heel touching so you can glide the bevel across the wood. Never touch the tip. That's not good. We'll show that in a minute. But you can see I'm cutting with like the bottom half of the tool, and it slides right along. When you do this properly, you get a beautiful finish on the wood. I tend to chicken out and bail out, and I will use a roughing gouge and a little extra sandpaper in my case. But you can see it actually kind of peels the wood a little bit. Yeah! Now here comes the catch. This gives me the heebie-jeebies because I always did this when I was learning. Watch the tip. You don't want to get it too high and cut with the tip because that happens. It just catches you off guard. That tip will dig in at just a moment's notice. It's not going to let you know it's coming. See where I'm cutting? No, that's not good. That should be a green line. I'm pointing towards the heel. But no, it's pointing towards the tip. And you're going to see the tip is going to just get a little bit off by maybe a degree or two. And I'm going to twist the tool, and that tip is going to dig right in, and bam, big design modification. And that's no fun because, boy, it just shudders through your body when that happens. I hate it. But, again, a lot of people use the skew, and they're really, really good at it. But while we're harping on how it gives me the heebie-jeebies, why not show it in close-up, too? There it digs in. wham, it hits. Also, you have a little rebound here because you're holding the tool, and so it kicks back in after it's come back. Opposite action causes a reaction or something like that. But you can see our happy face on the right and our sad face on the left. But look at the difference. You can see the one on the right, I'm cutting with the heel of the tool. The tip is throwing a shadow on the wood, actually. You can see it's up and away. So I'm rubbing the bevel on the lower end of the skew. And so when you don't do it, that's what you get on the left. You get a catch with the tip. Now, making a bead with a skew. That's really easy to do if you follow proper technique. You hold it upside down, you make an initial plunge. Then you roll the heel and just start taking little bits of wood off. Now, as I say, I'm not that great with a skew, so that's probably why I'm really good at teaching how to get a catch with it. I'm not that great at teaching how to get a bead with it because my left to right doesn't work. You can see I can do the cut real well on one side, the other side it doesn't work. But you can see I'm leading with the heel. If you take too much wood off, just back out and take a lighter cut. But it cuts in, it slices. You can see from the heel rubbing on the wood right there, it's really polishing the wood. It's making a nice shape. But how do you get into trouble with this catch? Well, there's many ways. And that's one of them. You start cutting up on the tool. So if you see how I'm cutting on the very tip of the heel on the left, I'm good. But I'm starting to cut up towards the center on the right, and you've got that curve there from the bead, and it's going to want to grab. And once it starts grabbing into the center of the tool, it pulls the tool down and in, and you get a catch. Definitely not a happy face time at that point when that happens. But there is a happy face on the left. As you can see, it's taking nice little shavings of wood off. Happy, 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 happy. Let's try a peeling cut. This is a way of roughing out wood. Now, I use a roughing gouge, like I said, but you can actually peel if you ride the bevel on the wood as you go. I just wanted to show you this to show how versatile this tool is, even though I don't use it a lot. Now, this is where angles can be deceiving. I'm not actually pushing it straight into the wood. I'm actually riding the bevel on top of the wood and letting it roll down or ride down as the wood peels away. And I mean, these are not normal shavings. These are wide, broad slivers of wood. I don't know. It's almost like veneer. You're peeling veneer off. And that's a pretty good example, I guess, it's a way to say it, because it's taking off big chunks. It's not the smoothest of surfaces, but in the right conditions, you can remove a lot of wood really, really fast. Now, the trimming cut with a skew. Like I said, I don't use a skew a lot, so I've been told I did this upside down, which is a great way to show you how to get a catch, I guess. Normally, they say you're supposed to have the long tip down, but it's the same principle because I'm trying to cut with the part of the tool that's the lowest right now. And you can see up at the top at the tip, you can see a shadow line. So the tip is not touching the wood at that point. It's tilted out towards you, the viewer, right now. Now, where you're going to get into trouble is if you get rid of that shadow and you roll the tool to where it's straight up and down and you're not just taking the heel of the tool and making contact. So you see it starting to cut. Oh, geez, I hate it when it happens. Do you know how hard it is to get a catch on purpose? It's not easy, believe me. But watch it here. I'm starting to make contact on the heel, but you can see, look at the top, it's getting too close to catching, and it's going to instantly grab that tip and bam, kick it right back into your gut. And then look, it continues to go ahead and make design modifications. So if you look on the left, you're going to see the cut starting with the heel touching. And if you look to the right, you're going to see that the tip is cutting in and catching. So I've tilted it to my left, and it's touching at the top and at the bottom. It's straight up and down. But on the right, no, on the left side of the screen, I'm tilting it to the right, so only the edge is touching at the bottom. So in other words, it's leaning to the right. Ugh, still gives me the willies thinking about that.
Kids, we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Let's look at a party tool and the one main problem you can have with it, called a pinch. Wait for it. Boing! It's one of the most spectacular catches you can get, because not only does the wood fly apart, the tool becomes an object that moves around. And it shakes cameras. Let's try it one more time just for fun. Glad I bought all this body armor. So, what is actually happening when you're doing this? Well, look, I'm plunging that tool all the way into the wood, right? Well, there are dynamics going on there. Lots of them. You have a large piece of wood spinning. Well, maybe not that big, but it has a large horsepower motor behind it. And you have a sharp tool and you're plunging it in. So this does look like a recipe for disaster. But again, there's lots of dynamics happening. So exactly what is going on that causes that thing to go kablooey? So as the tool plunges in, you can see I'm touching on that side with the wood, and I'm also touching on the other side with the wood. Now, if the wood gets a little wobbly or a little wonky, or I turn the tool a little bit left or right, I've got no room, right? So where that green arrow is, I need to come back out now and make a cut just half the width of the parting tool. That way I have room to play. I have room to make mistakes. That's called a relief cut. You want to make that every time you go. And if you look really carefully, you can see the bevel on the tool where I ground it. I don't want to go any deeper in that without making a relief cut, because at this point, the wood wants to start grabbing on the sides of the tool. Now, that happened real fast, so let's look at it in slow motion again. You can see there's no relief right here, so the wood is touching the sides of the tool. Also, now look, it's broken in the middle, so now it's flopping. And on the right side, on the tailstock, the wood stopped turning. On the headstock side, it's still turning, which makes a really big problem because something has to give. It's going to be the wood, it's also going to be the tool, which becomes a flying projectile, which can really hurt. Don't ask me how I know.
Oh, gross. Oh, ugh. Okay.
Tim's American Beauty was made by Robust Tools, America's premier lathe manufacturer. Quality hardened tool rests and live centers too. Robust. Built to turn wood. Enjoyed for a lifetime.
Thompson Lathe Tools. Welcome to a new level of professional wood turning tools. Made by a wood turner for wood turners.